we would actually just go to a nearby, not even nearby, let's say I used to go quite a distance. I was in Jaipur at the time in Rajasthan.
Okay.
And I would actually travel to go to a cyber cafe there and, and then try to look up this and that. And, because I just had to move. I knew I would be moving to Spain in some time. Yes. Yeah. I've always been an avid newspaper reader. So from the newspaper, I saw an ad. This was an Italian, an Indian woman who had lived in Italy. And she was offering classes in Spanish. And I don't know how that worked, but yeah, she said these two languages are very similar. And so she was teaching both Italian and Spanish. And in those days, one big culture shock for me was, considering I had very young kids, just about at that time, they passed the legalization of gay marriages. The thing about people just breaking into a dance anywhere, for example, that was just so beautiful. If I have to speak about culture shock, but in a very pleasant way. So you're walking on the street and all of a sudden, just because there's somebody playing the guitar on the street, as you know, you've also shared some videos. Yeah. So people just stand there and play the guitar, and then people just get up and start dancing. So
Hola y bienvenidos a otro episodio de mi canal de YouTube Español por Dentro. Bueno, el objetivo de mi canal siempre ha sido interactuar con gente de diferentes campos de vida, de diferentes intereses, y precisamente hoy tengo a una invitada muy especial para hablar de su viaje en aprender este idioma tan bonito de español. Hoy tengo conmigo una persona de la India que ha aprendido español un poco tarde en la vida, pero por eso está aquí. Muchas gracias, Beena Punjabi, por estar aquí. Hola, Beena, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, Siddharth, estoy bien, gracias. Y gracias por invitarme aquí.
No,
es
pues
un placer.
El placer es nuestro también, Beena, porque estoy seguro de que lo que vamos a escuchar de ti va a ser muy interesante para no solo los hispanohablantes, sino también para angloparlantes, because we are going to do this interview as a mix of Spanish and English, so that a lot of our viewers who may not understand Spanish to that level can understand Beena when she speaks in English, and we'll keep it a mix of English and Spanish. Is that fine, Beena?
Absolutely, it works.
Wonderful. Déjame presentarle a Beena. Beena Punjabi is a person with a flair for languages. She speaks 5 languages fluently and would like to add many more to that list. That's fantastic, Beena. Earlier on, she has worked as assistant professor of English at an engineering college, and currently she teaches Spanish online and offline. Her love for Spanish began in 2002 when she lived in Spain for 3 years with her family. Upon her return to India, she worked different jobs, but before long, Spanish beckoned. In due course, she earned her international diplomas in Spanish and began her journey as a Spanish language teacher. She's passionate about spreading her love for the Spanish language and spent the last 2 years working in Spain to experience Spanish way of life. And we are going to talk a lot about that experience of Beena as well in this interview. Beena Punjabi has an MA in English Language and Literature from Andhra University and a DELE B2 from Instituto Cervantes. Bueno, con esta introducción tan impresionante, muchas gracias, Beena, otra vez por estar aquí.
Y otra vez, gracias por invitarme, Siddharth.
So, Beena, I would like to start this interview by asking you about your journey in Spanish. So, you began learning Spanish at the age of 50, if I'm not wrong. So, what
a few years before 50.
A few years before 50. Okay. So, I stand corrected on that. So, Beena, what motivated you to learn Spanish at what many would consider at a slightly later age in life? Because generally people start learning when they are in colleges. In my case, like when I started in college, but now Spanish has spread so much that people are learning at school level. So, and many people learn in their 20s or 30s when they're probably needed for job. So what motivated you to learn a little later in life?
Well, actually, it's not something that happened suddenly. It's something that was always there inside me because, as I mentioned earlier to you, I did live in Spain earlier on. That was in 2002 up to 2005. So that's when I actually fell in love with all things Spanish. I was just in love with everything about Spain. The only thing is, at that time, I had 2 little kids and I was in a family situation where I didn't really get to move around or travel much. And I was in the Canary Islands at that time.
Oh, wow.
And so I didn't get to really visit the mainland. And that was something that always stayed with me, that, I really want to know more about this country. And so when I came back to India, I did look around if there was some way that I could get enrolled in some sort of a course. But India, in the sense, I'm talking about Vishakhapatnam, Vizag. So we did, at that time, Andhra University did not offer any courses in Spanish. We did have German, French, but not Spanish. So then that kind of was put on the back burner. I just forgot about it for the time being, but it was always there that I will learn Spanish someday. And let's just put it this way. When you ask me the question, what motivated you, I would like to change it slightly and say, who motivated you? Because in the course of life, and I just did a variety of jobs at that time. Also, because I came from an Orthodox family, I wanted to pursue my education first and foremost. So I worked jobs while simultaneously, getting myself educated and getting a degree and then a postgraduate degree. During all of this, Spanish took a backseat. And then I was taking my kids to swimming classes. And that's where I met Mari. She's a friend of mine of Cuban descent. And she would also come there with her daughter to the pool. And we just got talking, and it turns out, she's from the United States, but of Cuban descent. So then we started conversing in Spanish, whatever little I could remember, because it had been years since I moved from Spain.
Right.
And she said, "Oh my God, you have such a beautiful accent in Spanish. I think you should study Spanish, because I told her I haven't studied it, but I would really want to." And then she was the one, so I would say she played a role in reigniting my love for Spanish. And so that's when it all started again. So at the time, I was actually working as a property manager at a hotel in the hospitality industry at that time. And she gave me this big Collins dictionary, Spanish dictionary. And for me, learning has always been an addiction. Anything. You just ask me to study anything and I'm like, oh yes, why not? I should do it. And Spanish, that was something that was there for so long that I just, I slowly started learning Spanish. So I basically didn't do a formal course actually. I just studied on my own. I used books, I learned from YouTube and all of that in those days. And then I went and appeared for the Delhi exams. Okay. So once I cleared one level, then another level, and it was an addiction. And like that, I just qualified myself. That's how. And of course, yeah.
Yeah, no, please carry on. And of course, you're saying something, yeah.
The motivation was that maybe someday I would travel to Spain.
Right.
That was
that's fantastic, Beena. So vamos a hacer una digresión. We're going to digress a little bit because it's interesting. So when I gave your introduction, I mentioned that you lived in Spain for 3 years. So that must have been around the year 2002.
Yes, exactly.
So that's like we're going back a long way. So at that point of time, how was your learning of Spanish? And because I'm sure YouTube hadn't come by that time. There were no internet was probably in its infancy, and we didn't have so many resources for Spanish. So what were some of the struggles for you to learn Spanish at that point of time, or the fact that you lived in Spain, sort of that was probably the best way to learn Spanish for you, by talking to people? So tell us a little bit about that time in your life when you started learning Spanish.
Oh yeah, thank God. I'm so grateful that you're taking me back to that time because that's where it all started.
Yeah, and it's important to know that.
Yeah, so back then, of course, we didn't even have laptops or computers, PCs at home. I would actually just go to a nearby, not even nearby, let's say I used to go quite a distance. I was in Jaipur at the time, in Rajasthan.
Okay.
And I would actually travel to go to a cyber cafe there and then try to look up this and that. And, because I just had to move. I knew I would be moving to Spain in some time. And I was like, okay, how do I go about finding a Spanish teacher? Where do I go and find? So first off, I went to a bookstore and bought a Spanish dictionary, a Spanish-English Collins dictionary, a small one at that time compared to what Mari gave me. This was a small one. And then I started learning that way, Spanish to English, English to Spanish. But as you know, it's not something you can learn from a dictionary. You need some guidance, you need something. And so then I found this, I can't remember exactly how. I think it was a newspaper ad that I saw. Yes, yeah. I've always been an avid newspaper reader. So from the newspaper, I saw an ad. This was an Italian, a woman, an Indian woman who had lived in Italy, and she was offering classes in Spanish. And I don't know how that worked, but yeah, she said these two languages are very similar. And so she was teaching both Italian and Spanish. And so I went and joined her course, but I remember doing it for precisely 1 month, which wasn't really helpful to that level, for a person to go and be comfortable in a foreign country. But having said that, of course, firstly, we didn't have smartphones, you didn't have Google Translate. You had, I mean, those basic mobiles. I remember having a small Nokia set, typical,
Yeah.
the very
Yeah.
basic phone. And
Yeah.
and then with that, I landed in Spain. Of course, I had two little kids with me at the time. But I've always been very talkative. So I love to chat with people. So I think that's how I kept talking to people. And then I remember one person, she was Magdalena. Yeah, Magdalena. She was a neighbor. And she recommended one little Spanish English dictionary, which was not a dictionary actually, it was something for tourists, a little tourist guidebook, where you had things under separate headings, like for the hotel, for the hospital, and things like that, at the store and
All
at the
right.
grocery store, at the supermarket. And so I would take that dictionary with me everywhere. It was so funny because I would carry the dictionary with me, small one, and I would just carry that. And so I would try to read out phrases from there. That's how I started learning Spanish. But having said that, because I was a housewife and I had a whole lot to do with two little kids at home, and it's very different from India. So one is like always busy with that, and so I didn't really get to interact with a lot of locals. Um, the other place where I could say that I learned a lot of Spanish was when I went for my driving lessons. So I mean, I'm really surprised I'm getting this back today on this call, because that played an important role actually.
Okay.
So people, the Indians who would normally want to do a driving course would generally enroll for the English course, which
Okay.
was way more expensive.
Okay.
And the local language schools were different. I still remember the name Auto Escuela Atogo, it was called. And it was in my neighborhood. And my neighbors said, you'll understand, just go. Don't follow what others are doing. You just go and learn in the Spanish. And that way you learn the language also.
Right.
So that was something I did. I went and learned, I took driving lessons from a Spanish school.
Oh, that's interesting when you say that, Bina, because bueno, normalmente lo que pasa es que nosotros queremos estar siempre en nuestra zona de confort, ¿no? Y no queremos salir
Yes.
de esta zona. Y es importante hacerlo porque si no, nunca vamos a aprender la lengua y para aprender cualquier idioma es importante que nos pongamos en situaciones difíciles. That's what I think you did. So that's fantastic. So,
It's
Bina,
true.
now moving ahead. So, how has been your experience of learning the a new language? Although now you say that it was not sudden, and I'm sure when we talk about 2002 and that time, so 20 years ago, obviously you were 20 years younger, and the capacities are slightly different when you're younger and when you're slightly older in life. So, how has been the experience, the recent experience of you of sort of picking Spanish up again after sort of a gap, I would say, yeah, and what have been like, if I can club it with my next question, which is about what have been your biggest challenges that you've faced while studying Spanish?
Yeah, first off, the thing is, back then I didn't really study the grammatical structures or anything. It was all more colloquial, and the driving school was more related to that zone, right? Only driving related
Right.
vocabulary and stuff. So, and then again, as you said, it was too much of a gap, and so it was again something very new. But for me, the thing was, when I started out, I just went to all the YouTube channels that were available, and I would just try to learn from there. And then I bought the books from Cervantes. I ordered some books, and so I was kind of studying there. And then for me, the biggest challenge was not having people to speak with. So you're listening to podcasts, you're watching YouTube videos, but what about the speaking practice? You want to speak to someone. And Mari doesn't live in India all the time. So she's like you know, a lot of time in the US and then a few months here. And you can't really call everybody, you can't call someone every day to practice Spanish as such. So that was a challenge I felt. But having said that, when I went for the exam for the Dele B1, when I went to Cervantes, it was very encouraging, the oral round, because I think that's where I scored the highest. And in my scorecard, that was the
Right.
highest that I scored. And they
Wonderful.
were so encouraging that I kind of became comfortable after that. I was like, okay, so it's not as bad as I imagined it to be.
Okay, that's wonderful. So, when so of course you talk about the fact that you didn't have too many people to speak with on a daily basis. So that brings, and that was probably one of your biggest challenges. So that brings me to my next question about what strategies you used or you have used to improve your language. So the fact that you did not, and this is a problem that many students do face, Pina, that many students do not have that sort of social circle around them to be able to speak on a regular basis. So how did you tackle that issue, and what other strategies have you used to improve your language overall, which probably you still continue to do that?
Yeah, one is, of course, whenever I had the opportunity to speak with my friend Mari.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, I also tried to record conversations, you know.
Mm-hmm.
By now I had a smartphone, so I would
Mm-hmm.
record my own
Mm-hmm.
voice and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
speak and play it back and listen to that and
Mm-hmm.
try to correct my pronunciation like that.
Right.
Then that brings to mind another thing. I think we just have to find ways. There are lots of apps nowadays offering this conversation, opportunity
Mm-hmm.
of conversation. But my friend, I have another friend, Anita, who is an artist, and she was at that moment doing an art course.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a classmate from Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, her name is Lida Ramirez. And
Mm-hmm.
so that Lida was 1 year her senior. And this one, my friend just got talking to her because she had Colombia and she was like, her
Mm-hmm.
antenna went up. Okay, I think she can be helpful to Beena.
Mm-hmm.
So she spoke to her, passed her number to me. And that was, I think, a big boon for me in my case, because then Lida was also feeling quite uprooted, all the way from Colombia, doing an arts course here, fine
Mm-hmm.
arts. And she was also looking for somebody whom she could speak with in Spanish, that being her language. And so we developed a new friendship, and I would invite her home, and we would also generally go out together to have conversations in Spanish. So for me, that was something that worked well. But I mean, I wouldn't say that would work for everybody, but yes, if you look around you, there are many people that might be also looking to speak, you know, and also maybe sometimes it's also like a language exchange. The other
Right.
person wants to practice their English and you want to
Mm-hmm.
speak in Spanish. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or then again, the other option would be to
Mm-hmm.
use apps where,
Yes,
you know, where
apps.
you can actually speak with a
Mm.
person in Spanish. Yeah, that would be a
Right.
good one.
Absolutely. And these days, I think learners have a lot more resources at their disposal to be
Available.
able to learn the language in a more effective way. Bina, my next question is, the fact that you have learned Spanish, you started it many years ago and now. So, have you noticed any difference in the way you learn now as compared to when you were younger? And I mean, I'm not just talking about probably the technological tools that we have, the internet and all, but just generally the way society has evolved. Do you see any difference in the way you've learned now than when you learned earlier?
Yeah, of course. See, also, if I have to just talk about learning, when I see the way students learn in school now, for
Yeah.
example, even hoy en dia, when
Mm-hmm.
we see how kids are learning in school, at that level, we are usually looking to score marks, and
Yeah.
the focus is more on the marks
Yeah.
when you're
Yeah.
doing a course. But
Yeah.
but then again, at this age, when I started learning now, it was more about the pleasure of learning the language. So as they say, it's more about the journey than the destination.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so at this stage, I feel my focus was more on enjoying the process and learning.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would say that was the big difference, because when you're younger, that pressure of
Mm-hmm.
learning and, you know, scoring marks and things. I mean, I'm speaking about
Yeah.
in terms of when students want to learn Spanish. So I think you have to just get rid of that pressure and enjoy the process,
Yeah.
and also lose that fear. I mean, I think as we grow older, we're also less conscious of what
Mm-hmm.
people might think. I think
Yeah.
that's one thing.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
now I don't really, at my age, I don't really care what somebody thinks about me making a mistake. I'm more interested in having fun speaking the language, so I'll just go out there and make all the errors, and that's totally okay. That was the difference. I mean, even in my experience of living in Spain recently,
Right.
was that I would just go there and speak, and people actually appreciate it. Nobody's out there to pick your mistakes. They're
Yeah.
in fact very happy to correct you and help
I
you.
think yeah, that's something very well pointed out, Bina, because me also being a school teacher, I feel that there is a lot of pressure on students to get marks, and somewhere in that pressure, they lose the joy factor of learning the language. So very well said, and I think that's something that through this interview, I think if we can reach out to as many youngsters as possible, that it's not just about marks only, but it's about when you enjoy naturally, you will get good marks. So that is something that's important. So my
And
next
also, I
question.
would like to add something here. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
Sometimes the students come up with interesting information, when you encourage them to have fun,
Yeah.
because they have all the resources and they're
Yeah.
so smart with social media and all of that. I think
Right.
we have a lot to, I mean, I have a lot to learn from them. So they come
Yeah.
up with such interesting ways and they'll come and tell me. I
Mm-hmm.
feel, okay, that's nice. I really encourage them for that when they come up with those things. Okay,
Yeah.
ma'am, have you watched this movie?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's true. That is true. That is true. Yeah. Bina, my next question is: how has learning Spanish language influenced your daily life or routine? Any anecdotes that from your daily life where probably you feel that Spanish has helped you, or it has sort of made you come up with some wonderful experience so you can share.
Yeah, yeah. I think learning Spanish and then traveling to Spain
Yeah.
has changed my entire outlook altogether. So in India, I mean, I can only speak for myself. I can't
Yeah.
speak for others my age, but for me, I had begun to feel a little bit old. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so now I'm 50 and plus, of course. So
Mm-hmm.
then it's like you just start to feel older somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's your own personal atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went there, the first thing that I think that has changed in my life is I suddenly don't feel old anymore. I don't feel old at all, because when I went there and looking at the people in their 70s and 80s happily pushing their carts in the supermarkets and then doing the cleaning, all the household chores, and the way they travel in their 70s and 80s, it's just amazing. So you start looking at yourself, wait, what? I'm just 50 plus. I mean, I'm not even in my 60s. Forget about the 70s and 80s. And suddenly it dawns on you that age is just a number, please. I mean, so for me, that has been a game changer. And also just the way the Spanish people live their lives. And I mean, you know that, you've traveled
Yeah.
as well. So the way they appreciate or they enjoy every minute is
Mm-hmm.
something that was
Mm-hmm.
very different for me. So, I mean, the way even every cup of coffee, a little bite of cake, even that, I mean, you just
Yeah.
enjoy everything. And the
Yeah.
travel,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
when you said anecdote, I remember one particular anecdote. A friend of mine, Divya, who's much younger, she and I were traveling. She's in her 20s actually, and she and I were
Mm-hmm.
traveling together from Madrid to Segovia.
Mm-hmm.
And we were at the estación de autobús esperando. Y en ese momento encontramos una mujer que
Mm-hmm.
era mucho más mayor que yo.
Mm-hmm.
Creo que era como
Mm-hmm.
en los 70, ¿no? It must
Mm-hmm.
have been maybe even late 70s. And
Mm-hmm.
she was standing there ready to travel and all of that. And you could see her age on her face a little bit, but the energy was completely different. And she
Mm-hmm.
was talking to us and she wanted to know, ¿de qué país eres? No, she was asking me, and I was like, India. And she was like, pero no, tú no, you don't look like Indian. I'm like, excuse me. I mean, so then we just got talking, and then she
Did you
asked me
did
my
you did you
age.
ask her? Sorry to interrupt you. Did you ask her why did she say that you don't look Indian?
Exactly. I asked
Yeah.
her, I said,
Yeah.
why do you say that?
Yeah.
Why? Because she said that about both of us.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and why do you say that? She said,
Mm-hmm.
no, I mean, I think you guys actually wear a piece of cloth, no, just a long cloth, and then you put something here on your
Yeah.
forehead. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't blame her because she would
Yeah.
have seen that on television. So she said that's who I thought Indians look like. I mean, again, I would say it was a rarity because nowadays there are plenty of Indians living in Spain, a
Yeah.
lot of Indians. And,
Yeah.
and maybe she didn't have a lot of Indian friends, I would say that. So she looked at me and then she asked me my age even. The minute I said 53, the minute I said 53, she was like, eres joven. And I was like, joven? So she said, yeah, I mean, if you look at me, then you are joven because she said, I have a daughter who's older than you.
Oh, okay.
So, and she was actually precisely going to meet her daughter and the grandchildren to Segovia. And so I was like, oh, so I'm so sorry. It was not Segovia, it was Toledo. Segovia I
Toledo.
went
Okay.
later, yeah. So she said, I'm going to visit my grandchildren in Toledo. And then she told us a lot about her life and just seeing that energy in her and, and being that 70 something. And I was like, wait a minute. I mean, what am I calling myself old for? And so I had many other experiences like this and in fact, I would like to share one if we have the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead. Yeah. We have a lot of time. Yeah.
So when I went from here, the first year, I didn't know where I would be staying, right? I mean, in the sense for the school year. So I had just booked an Airbnb. And the person I booked the Airbnb with, her name was Olga, is Olga. And she is a very, very friendly woman in her 60s. And she runs this Airbnb. So I just booked it, didn't know what to expect, nothing. But the interaction with her was very interesting right from here because when she read my name on that booking, she made a WhatsApp call to me and said that she had visited India some 30 years ago when she was really young. And so she was like, can you get me one of those dupattas from India? She was so excited that one Indian is coming to stay with me and all of that.
Okay.
And would you believe it, Siddharth, she actually came to the airport at 12:30 at night, when she heard that my flight was landing at 12:30. And I was telling her, and asking her rather, whether I should be staying at the airport, what do I do? Because I'm new to the place and 12:30 seems like very late at night. She said, no te preocupes, I'll come and pick you up, I was like, oh, that's so sweet. So then she came and then of course we got friendly over that period of time that I stayed at her Airbnb while looking for long-term accommodation.
Right.
And seeing her was so inspiring. She was running so many things simultaneously. I mean, it was just amazing. She had a farm where she actually worked and grew all her vegetables and stuff. It was a little outside Malaga, but she was working on that. She had two Airbnb properties that she was working on. I mean, she had to take care of both of those properties.
Right.
Then she had a schizophrenic aunt whom she had to look after. And I mean, it was just amazing to see the energy. So, from the minute I set foot in Spain,
Yeah.
the experience was that age is just a number.
Yeah.
So, that I
Fantastic.
would say.
No, and this is what I really wanted for us to speak about. This wanted to come out in this interview about your experience. So, just for some of our listeners who may not know as to what program is it that on which you went. So, could you just very briefly talk a little bit about this program so that people are aware of it and they can avail this opportunity?
Gladly. So it's called the Language Assistance in Spain program, and you need to have a certification in English. Of course, it could be an IELTS or a TOEFL or a CELTA. There are various which you can check online, and you need to have that certification because you need a C1 level of English to be able to teach English over there. So that is your first requirement, and then of course then you get called for an interview and all that, and you get to go and teach for a whole academic year, which is actually
Teach English to Spanish kids, right?
students. Yes,
Okay.
yes, to Spanish students, but it's not just English. It's actually a bilingual program that the Spanish government runs in schools, and there are select schools which run this bilingual program. So you get a few English classes as well, but there are also other subjects. Could be chemistry, history, biology. It could be anything at all. So they teach all these subjects in both English and Spanish.
Right.
So
Right.
basically, you get to do the English part of it. You create
Right.
activities
Right.
based on that particular topic that you are
Right.
required to teach, and you can create content based on that, and you teach them English. And mainly, it's called the auxiliares de conversación.
Auxiliaries
And
de
so the
conversación.
thing is about speaking to them in English,
Right.
and you're not allowed to tell them that you speak Spanish. You're not
Right.
allowed. You have to
Oh, wow.
just speak to
Okay.
them in
Okay.
English so that they are encouraged to try.
Right, exactly. That's something important. So, people who are out there, and there are a lot of youngsters and others who have been taking advantage of this and going like Beena has done. So, I would strongly urge all of you who have not been on this program to please check this out on the website of the Spanish government's education ministry, and you'll get more information on that. So, Beena, going ahead with our talk here, fantastic. You know what you shared about your experiences here. Sort of again, sticking on to your experience in Spain a little bit, Beena, I would like to know any cultural shocks that you experience. I mean, of course, you've been to Spain, you lived in Spain for 3 years, so probably not this time when you went for an auxiliary program, but maybe if you can share any cultural shocks that you sort of experienced when you were in Spain the first time all those years ago, or even now, and how Spain has changed from the time that you lived in the early to mid 2000s to when you went now for the auxiliary program. How has Spain sort of changed in your view?
So the earlier time when I went, um, I don't think I met, again, that was in the Canary Islands. And in those days, one big culture shock for me was, I mean, considering I had very young kids, just about at that time, they passed the legalization of gay marriages. That had happened just then, just when I went. And so one was that because we here in, let's just speak about my town, and that too we're speaking about more than 20 years ago. And so I was driving with my kids. Like I said, I did my driving course, so I earned my license as well. So then I was actually at a traffic signal, and there was this same sex couple on the bike right next to my car. And of course, there's a lot of public display of affection in these Western countries. It's very different from India in that sense. So there was a lot of display of affection going on that bike. And for me, it was more about what do I tell my children?
Mhm, mhm,
Because my daughter actually asked me a question. And so for me, I would say that was one big culture shock at that time.
mhm, mhm,
Of course, I explained to her in the best possible way at that time because I knew that this is life over here and they have to know what it is. So,
mhm.
I had to do it in my own way.
Right.
But that was one that I can immediately think of.
Mhm,
The other thing is that back then, again, speaking of my own little town here, I mean, it's smaller than the metros. So, the thing about people just breaking into a dance anywhere, for example, that was just so beautiful. I mean, if I have to speak about culture shock, but in a very pleasant way.
yeah.
So, you're walking on the street, and all of a sudden, just because there's somebody playing the guitar on the street, as you know, I
Mm,
mean, you've also shared some videos.
yeah.
So people just stand there and play the guitar, and then people just get up and start dancing. So
Mm,
all these things
mm,
really made me shed a lot of my own inhibitions as well. I mean, I'm talking about this of course,
yeah.
I'm talking about this recent experience
Yeah.
because, like I said earlier on, I didn't probably go out a lot,
Mhm,
and what we did go out, it was all within the whole family system. So I
right.
wasn't really interacting with other people a lot.
Mhm,
But this time it was all about Spanish and Spain and me, and it was a very personal
mm,
interaction this time. It was because vivir sola en un país extranjero, eso sí que puede ser un reto, ¿no? Un
sí,
reto
sí,
muy grande, sí.
sí.
Eh, Al principio, por
Mm,
ejemplo, ¿no?
claro.
You just reach there and you don't know anybody, and you are just on your own and doing everything. And so you are forced to interact with the people,
Mm,
right? Local
mm,
people. And that turns out to be a blessing in the end. I mean, if you are
mm,
a language learner and if you really
mm,
want to improve your language, then this is the best possible thing that could
yeah.
happen. I can't
Mm,
think of a lot of shocking things, again,
mhm,
maybe because by now, again, the world is also more open through social
mm,
media and all of that. No,
right.
we are more
Mm,
exposed to
right, right.
information now. So.
Mm, right. Yeah.
But I did meet one very interesting interaction would be, I mean, it's
Mhm,
not a shock or anything, but there was this literature fest going on very close to where I lived. And I just walked across because I had nothing better to do. And I went to see, and there was this chat that was going on with a gay author who had written a book and who was there to actually, kind of speak about his book.
Mm-hmm.
And so I attended that chat and I was sitting there and listening to him. And then as I walked around and later went to meet him also at his stall, and then there were these other gay couples there, and people just generally. The thing is, Spanish people are so friendly, so
Mm-hmm.
they're just so friendly. They'll just strike up a conversation with you. And so there was this couple that came and spoke to me and wanted to know where I was
Mm-hmm.
from because very obviously we are brown skinned and they know
Mm-hmm.
that you're not Spanish. So then they came and wanted to know, and then I got
Mm-hmm.
friendly with them. And I remember his name was Diego, the one who came and
Mm-hmm.
spoke to me, and his partner was African. I can't remember his name now.
Mm-hmm.
But then they invited me over for coffee the next day, and then I went to this
Mm-hmm.
lovely gay bar where they all apparently meet up, and there they had even language exchange
Mm-hmm.
programs and stuff. And knowing that I was there for this reason, he invited me over, and it was just very pleasant. Yeah.
Mm. Wow, fantastic. And so the second part of the question, wow, how has Spain sort of changed from the time that you lived in Spain for 3 years earlier on and now? Because living for 3 years is a considerable amount of time for you to probably sort of gauge, a good sample size for you to gauge a difference. So anything that you feel you found radically different in Spain this time around when you were there than the time when you lived earlier?
Well, I remember, see, for me, again, it was very situational. What happened was when I was in Spain at that time, back then, I can't remember the exact year, but those bomb blasts in Madrid happened at that time,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah.
And it was a huge, huge tragedy. And
I
there were
think
a
I
lot
think
of
it was
children.
2005. Yeah.
So there were children involved. And it was like there was a lot of outrage about this, that happened in Madrid, of course, but then even in the Canary Islands. So what happened was the explosion happened through a cell phone. And this cell phone was purchased from an Indian store. Okay. Of course, how was the Indian to know who was buying this and for what purpose? That's another matter. But the point is, it was out there in the news that this device was purchased from an Indian store. And so for us, it became very difficult. At that time, I remember they weren't even willing to serve us at restaurants. It, it became kind of a fear to go out, even, and nothing happened to me. Nothing happened. But I remember walking to pick up my child from school and all of that, and people looking at you strangely and not really attending to you even at supermarkets. And it was a very temporary thing, but that led to a lot of other small things, that happened after that bomb blast. Cut to 2022 when I went now. I mean, the respect that they have for Indians, it was amazing. I mean, I just felt that one, I saw a lot of Indians where I lived. Of course, I was in Torremolinos, Malaga. So that region, that area happens to have a lot of Indians.
Mm-hmm.
So I did see that there was a lot of love for Indians. They celebrated the Indian festivals, even Diwali. The mayor came to light the lamp and all of that.
Mm.
It was celebrated in a big way.
Wow.
So for me, that was one thing. Other than that, I think that love for life that was there even
Mm-hmm.
back then and
Mm.
even now. It's the
Mm.
same. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. Coming towards now the close of this fascinating chat with you, Beena. My question, taking you back to a bit of the language aspect of your experience. So, what part of Spanish do you find most difficult? Of course, you spoke about the oral aspects, but in terms of grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, anything that you found most difficult when you started learning?
Grammar.
Yeah.
The grammar, of course. It's because then you have to remember the conjugations, especially in
Mm,
the initial days until you actually start getting used to it.
right.
And I think it really helps if you live in a Spanish speaking zone because then you're just listening to it all the
Mm,
time and you just know
mm,
what to use where. But
mm,
otherwise, as a beginner, I think grammar can be the most
mm,
challenging.
right. Okay.
And then as
Okay.
we go along, of course, we lose that
Mm,
inhibition and we listen. When we're listening, we
mm,
also speak. And yeah, but grammar.
right. Right. Okay. What advice, Bina, would you give to people at your age, or maybe slightly younger to you, or maybe older to you as well? About starting to learn a new language at that stage in life. So, what advice would you give?
I would say, please, please, please go ahead and learn a language, because other than this benefit, see, language can open doors. It
Mm-hmm.
actually opens doors to another world, another
Mm-hmm.
culture, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. I mean, and then Spanish is spoken by what, like 500 million,
Yeah.
and then that's
Mm-hmm.
native speakers. And then if you talk about the second
Mm-hmm.
language and all that, it's like more than 600 million. So I mean, you can imagine, you travel anywhere at whatever age, you should learn a new language,
Mm-hmm.
because then, one, it also helps in these things, like your mental sharpness, because
Mm-hmm.
as we know, that cognitive decline that happens as we grow
Mm-hmm.
older. So learning a new language can actually help you delay that as well. That is
Mm-hmm.
one of the benefits. The other thing is, of course, as I said, as it is these days, I think, with all the apps and all the resources available, and considering that we do have more time than the youngsters, so
Mm-hmm.
we can actually make use of that and learn a new language. And then Spanish, let me tell you my experience. For example, when I traveled to Italy, even,
Mm-hmm.
I was on my own. It was a solo trip, and I went to quite a bit of Italy, and all of that. And everywhere they spoke Spanish. It was just so cool. Other than English, they also spoke Spanish. So, I mean, there are a lot of benefits if you learn a new language, and just don't think, so now we're too old to do something. As I said, just follow the Spanish. Age is just a number.
Mm-hmm.
Just go ahead and do whatever it is. And I'm not even saying just Spanish. Please learn any language that catches your fancy. There are so many resources available. Please, please do it. Yeah.
Right, right. Great, fantastic. And my final question to you, Abina, is what are your own long-term goals with Spanish language? What do you hope to achieve with it for the next few years?
See, my goal, if I look at my city here, my town, city, whatever you call it, yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
actually a city. So here I find that it's not really taught as a second language. So you only have it as a third language in the schools here. French is there as a second language, but Spanish we get to catch up. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because French has been around for longer,
Mm-hmm.
and so that many schools offer it as a second language. Whereas I find that that is something, my goal is to make it a second language here,
Mm-hmm.
and ensure that more and more people learn the language, because I feel it's such a romantic language, such a lovely
Mm-hmm.
language to
Mm-hmm.
learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I mean, maybe because I just love Spanish, my job is to, I mean, my goal is to just create more and more awareness
Mm-hmm.
about Spanish and the Spanish people and the cuisine and everything about
Mm-hmm.
Spain.
Mm, wonderful, wonderful. That's great. So I hope that people who have listened to Bina have really understood the spirit of Spanish. I think you have been able to really bring out the spirit of not just the language but the spirit of the Spanish people through your experiences, Bina. So I'm sure people who have listened to this interview have enjoyed listening to you and will definitely take something back in terms of Spanish.
I'd like to add one little thing here, Siddharth, if you permit.
Sure.
For all the youngsters out there who are listening and whom I just mentioned about the language assistant program in Spain, please go ahead and do it, because then it, once you land in Spain, once you get your resident card, you can actually travel to all the countries that are in the Schengen zone.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing that I think I enjoyed on the side, other than learning
Mm-hmm.
Spanish on the
Mm-hmm.
weekends, because you're just working 4 days a week. So the other
Mm-hmm.
3 days you're left to explore, and you can happily
Mm-hmm.
travel to any other European country and be back.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
also you have a lot of longer breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's one more advantage. Other than the fact that you're getting your Spanish immersion, you would also get to
Mm-hmm.
travel and see the world. At
Wow,
least I
fantastic.
fulfilled my childhood dream of visiting
Mm-hmm.
certain places.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Great, great. Yeah, so that's why, I said during in the middle of this interview that please do check out on the Spanish Education Ministry's website about the Auxiliares de Conversación. That's the name of the program. And do experience that. I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. So, as wonderful as has been today's interview as well, Bina, thank you so much. It was something that I was really looking forward to since a long time and great that
Me too.
we could finally do it.
Me
Yes.
too. Me too. It's been an absolute pleasure being here with you, Siddharth.
Muchísimas gracias, Vina. Y espero que os
Happy.
haya gustado esta entrevista. Hasta el siguiente capítulo de Español por Dentro. Chao.